Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the School District Number 35 Langley. It's our regular meeting of the Board of Education for our Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. First off, the audio-visual recording webcasting of our regular board meeting. Those in attendance were informed that as per policy number 7, regular and special meetings of the board may be streamed live, archived, and accessed online. The board reserves as a sole discretion via motion at any meeting, the right to not stream live or archive a meeting or a portion of a meeting. Further, the board reserves the right to edit any recorded portion of a meeting. I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order. The Board of Education called the meeting to order at 7:15 p.m. and began the meeting with the traditional statement. I'd like to acknowledge that the Langley School District is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Matsqui, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations. We gather here tonight in an understanding of the importance of Yayastol, Skekayos, working together and Natsamat, Letsamat, uniting ourselves with one mind, one heart, to ensure that we support and inspire all learners to reach their full potential. Report from in-camera. Oh, I guess I'd like to introduce our attendees. We have some online and we have some in the room. Starting off with our partner groups, we'll start out with Human Anasori, QP 1851 President, Tanya Kerr, LTA President, Alicia Rempel, DPAC President. Kim Anderson is the LPVPA Vice President. Jennifer Johnson is the QP 1260 President. Shelley Sondergaard is QP 1260 Executive at Large, and also Tanya Henry, QP 1260 Recording Secretary. From staff, we have our Superintendent, Gordon Stewart, and then we have Brian Izelli. He's our Secretary Treasurer. Mr. Woody Bradford, Assistant Superintendent. Mel Gill, Assistant Superintendent / Deputy Superintendent. Shind Chand is the Assistant Secretary Treasurer. Barry Bunyan, the Assistant Superintendent. Joanne Abshire is our Communications Manager. And also Judy Swanson is our Executive Assistant. Tonight we have Paul Bobeo, the Technical Support Specialist 1, and Dale Vu is our Technical Support Specialist 3. As far as trustees present, I'd like to introduce you to Charlie Fox. And then we have Marty Wilson, Tony Ward, Suzanne Perot, and then we have Shelley Coburn, and David Todd is our Vice Chair. And then myself is the board chair, and I'm Rod Ross. And moving on, report from in camera. Would the vice chair like to speak, please?
Thank you. In camera, we discussed legal and personnel issues.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda. I need a mover that the Board of Education adopts the consent agenda items as provided. Vice Chair David Todd is moving it, seconded by Suzanne Perot. Thank you very much. Consideration, okay. Oh, we need to vote on it? Okay, all those in favor. Small detail. All right, it is carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Consideration of tonight's agenda. That the agenda be approved as presented. I need a mover for tonight's agenda, please. Charlie Fox is the mover, seconded by Mr. David Todd. Thank you very much. And I need a vote on that too. All those in favor of the agenda as presented. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. And it is also carried unanimously. Now on to number 6, the superintendent's report. 6.1, the COVID-19 update. Over to you, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Ross, and good evening, everyone. And yes, how could we have a meeting without talking about COVID? So I'm going to share some of the common questions I get with respect to COVID in terms of from parents, community, and obviously have the opportunity for trustees to ask questions in terms of things they hear about too. I'll also be speaking at DPAC Thursday, and I'm going to be sharing the same information. And the trustee Ward will be joining me there too, so you can probably do a little bit of a shout out. So I'm going to start off with masks. This is one that as we've moved from grades 4 to 12 mask mandate, it's now K to 12. And one of the things we're getting from some parents, you need to know that there will be people divided on this. There'll be people that will think this is very helpful for children to have this in place, and there's going to be some that don't. And I tend to get letters from both. But I think one of the pieces that folks are having a trouble understanding is, hey, there's a student, I was at the school and I saw a student without a mask. Or my child's in a classroom, and you know what? There's kids in that class without a mask. You know, why aren't you doing something about that? So I'd like to assure parents in our community that we do everything we can within the guidelines that were provided to support that public health order. The reality is that parents can let the administrator know that their child can't wear a mask. And they have, it's right down in the guidelines, a person who cannot tolerate wearing a mask for health or behavioral reasons can be exempt. Do they have to provide medical documentation? No. So parents saying that is enough right there to not have a child have to wear a mask. And so what will take place is if this occurs in a classroom, yes, the building administrator will follow up with the parent, but if that's what is said, then we cannot deny a child their education. That's also very clear in the order if they're not able to wear one. I think we also have to be mindful of little kids. And they're going to do as their parents ask them to do in many cases. And we certainly would not want to be saying, hey, because your parent feels this way, we're going to deny you an education. But we do have that out there. I think there is some confusion around also, does this extend outdoors? I saw a parent without a mask outside. What do? We don't have any means to kind of go and address that. I know that our administrators are doing the best they can to keep the community informed, say, hey, keep the physical distancing. Great to have those masks on, absolutely. Certainly with the kids, encourage it. Absolutely go and get a vaccine, all those types of things. But there are limits. And I'm very conscious of a system right now that feels certainly at times already worn out, if you can believe it. But it's not something that's been going on for 2 months. It's going to be going on 18 months plus. And you can certainly feel the tensions out there. So they cannot be mask police all the time. I need people to be patient with this, understand it, particularly K-3. These are young kids that are doing the very best they can, and the teachers are doing the best they can to work alongside kids. But if you get questions on that, the reality is, as I've stated, is they cannot be denied that if this exemption is asked for by a parent. The other piece that's coming up quite a bit is this district going to have a vaccine mandate for staff? And that was the latest bit of news that's going on out there within communities. I know that the BC Schools Trustees Association is asking trustees right now, can you wait for the guidelines? There are going to be guidelines given from BCPC. I have not yet received them. I believe we'll get something this week, but I haven't got them yet. And I think they're what I notice many districts approach and say, let's see the guidelines first, because what I'm trying to tell parents, and I'll tell them tomorrow night again, is this is a very complex issue. It's not just a case of everybody should go out and get vaccinated. Why can't you just do this? It's so easy. There's many things to consider, such as we don't know the current vaccination rate amongst our staff. That's private information. So we could have 80% vaccinated, 80, maybe it's 90, which would be fantastic. Let's go with 90. We have over 3,500 employees. So you think about it, if we have 10% that aren't vaccinated, you could be talking up to 350 people. That's a lot of staff. And what are the implications on that if people seek accommodations? Do we, if they have a medical accommodation, how do we kind of help them be able to meet that? Should they choose, I just don't want to get it. I don't want to have it. What will be the impact on the system? You're hearing about some places in the Lower Mainland where they have functional closures because they just don't have enough staff. We also know there's some staff shortages in key areas that I just can't say, well, they're gone, I can replace them with someone else. It's just one of the factors that you have to consider. So it's not as straightforward as just simply saying, well, why don't you simply go ahead in terms of trying to do this? So we're trying to let people know there is some complexity there. We've met even with Fraser Health today, and what's interesting is they talk about something like efficacy. And what they've said is that if your actual district is some operating around the 90%, anything actually over 80, but we'll go with 90 right now, %, that difference in terms of having it go from 90 to 95 impact on the spread of the virus is actually very, very, very minimal. And so they're not, that's why you're not having Fraser Health run out and say, go do this, because they actually don't believe that it's going to make a difference when you have something like that. If you're at 50% or 60, that's one thing. 80 or 90, they're reluctant to say that that's going to be, there's no magic bullet here that's going to solve this that I think people are looking for. So that is also something to be very mindful of when it comes to the vaccine mandate. So we're going to certainly look at the guidelines when they come out. We will certainly look at what the potential impact would be. We will be certainly sharing that with trustees. But I just want to make sure that I explain to parents that there's a lot to consider. What will be the impact of the age of 5 to 11 getting a vaccine? What could we see there? Timelines. So let's say even if this district said, let's say a week or two from now, you know what, we're going to go for it. Everybody's got to be double vaccinated. Well, that's about an 8-week process. Okay, so now we're talking into the new year. What do things look like in the new year? So you have to weigh what's the amount of disruption and what is the potential impact going to be. The reality is the spread of the virus from staff, transmission from staff in our system is extremely little. That's not the issue. It's unvaccinated homes where kids come from, bring it in, we discover it and kind of get them home. That's where the issue is. I'm putting it on out there not to convince you one way or the other. What I'm trying to say when I talk to parents is please know that when trustees have had this put to them, they got a lot to consider on this one, and let them work through that complexity. That's what I'm really asking of the community. The other one I get is school notifications. Mr. Stewart, you're so slow. Why is it I knew a week ago and I'm only getting the notification now to self-monitor or self-isolate? Why didn't you? My child went and told the principal. As soon as he knows, why can't that principal or he or she go out now and send a notification? Because we're not permitted. Fraser Health has very, very tight controls on who sends the information out and when, because they want to do their work to determine, is it a self-monitor? Is it an isolation? Is it neither? So I understand it. I talk to parents all the time. I understand that frustration there. They've been overwhelmed a bit. I'm going to put up some numbers, and I think you can see why they've been overwhelmed lately. And I think that's kind of got the system taking a little longer to respond. It's leading to frustrations, but it is not the school system responsible for that. We get that information out as soon as we can when we're given the green light. And I got to be fair to Fraser Health. I don't believe they anticipated the September and October we've seen. And I don't think they had the staffing to meet that. And they're trying to kind of work through that. I know Assistant Superintendent or Deputy Superintendent Mel Gill spends a lot of time with Fraser Health working through all kinds of questions around this as we're fielded with it. And our District Principal, Maggie Gobriel, spends a lot of time on it too. The other one too is parents and schools. This one I get about parent teacher. We've got that starting tomorrow. A lot of schools Wednesday and Thursday. We had Meet the Teacher night. I've got other events parents want to be at. Gord, should we do these? Should we not do these? We're going to have to ultimately come to living. We have to live with this virus. We're going to have to come to terms with that. It's never going to be gone probably completely. And there's always going to be something out there. And this one is going to linger for a while yet. So what I think this year was really meant to be is how do you start to kind of transition? Not to do everything like you did it before, because quite frankly, we've done some learning that you don't have to. But what are some of those things that you want to kind of get back? And parents have typically really valued that parent-teacher piece. So can you do it in a way that is absolutely can, maintain safe conditions for folks? So what you'll see, for example, this year, you're going to be some that'll just do it on Teams. They can do it. There's some parent, I just want to do it Teams. I don't want to come in. They have that option. They want to come in, great. Then when they come in, they're definitely a parent or a parent sitting a significant distance from the teacher, scheduled appointments only, no walk-ins. So this is no worries there in terms of being able to mount the ground. And again, and then having good spacing in terms of intervals out there. So again, it's a way to kind of start to nudge back, but we want to do it obviously in a safe way because there's a lot of, psychologically right now, there's still a lot of anxiety within the system, which we totally get. But I don't think we want to, have another year of not doing those at all. Because I think the system's really looking for some sense of normalcy within the system also. So those are kind of those are kind of the main questions I've been fielding around COVID right now. I think the one that will probably have the most pressure on it in the days ahead will be the vaccine mandate for staff should trustees wish to go that way. I will just share a few numbers here in terms of, and this is as of today. Case count, and we say case counts, notifications. How many notifications did we do? In September, between the 12th to the 30th, over 18 days, 55 notifications at 24 sites, 33 were self-monitoring, 22 were self-isolation. That's a lot. Like last year, we didn't have, I'm trying to think, we had a time we had 55 in a short time span like that. I don't believe we did. October 1st to 19th, 100 notifications, 33 sites, 81 self-monitoring, 19 isolation. So what you're saying is over 110 plus on the self-monitoring. Most of them are going there because so many people are vaccinated now in terms of out in the regular system. And again, fewer on the self-isolation side. But still, if you're a parent in a community in a school and I'm going to share some of the school counts, it'll make you nervous. You kind of think, oh, there's a case out there. Maybe there's been a couple this week. And we're tending to find they come out a little bit in waves. So you could have nothing, and all of a sudden for a week or two, you can, oh my goodness, and then it stops again. So you're trying to kind of get folks through that period around the self-monitoring piece more than anything else to get through. But if you're wondering why folks are kind of going, when they see those types of numbers, you can understand where people are getting a little nervous. Fortunately, if the children are getting COVID, right now it's presenting in terms of the flu-like symptoms are certainly much like a minor flu versus if you're elderly, obviously you have much more to be considered of. So the other piece here is that is difficult for you to see, but it's to share with you. We've had 5 sites that there have not been any notifications yet since it started this year. And then if you look at if you kind of go 3 or less, you can see that 3/4 of the system have not had up only 3 since we started. So I put that out there because sometimes, you know, people get really alarmed right away. Oh my, like even just hearing about the 100 cases or 100 notifications over that October 1st, 19th. But when you look at how big of a system we are, really, you look at an Alice Brown. Alice Brown certainly went through a real couple of challenging weeks there. Glenwood recently has also gone through a couple of, and then all of a sudden you're going to see it taper back again. But when you look at if you want to go 7 and over, about 8 out of 40, 4 to 45 sites. So that's, I try to get perspective just in case you kind of get questions in terms of where that's at. What do we do in a case like an Alice Brown or a Glenwood? That's where, again, when there's any kind of a parental interaction piece, I know that certainly Assistant Superintendent Woody Bradford and Deputy Superintendent Mel Gill, they both work with those schools to say, hey, is there some things we need to do a little bit differently here short term just to kind of get you through? So that might be, for an example, they may, in the case of parents, you say, you know, we're just going to do it teams only there. Maybe. If that's a building principal working alongside of us to make those decisions. And with Fraser Health, do we need to do anything different? Do we need to have a team come in and take a look? All those are conversations that we have in cases where we're seeing a little bit of a run in terms of cases. But overall, given again, you have to remember 23,000 students, how many sites we have. I think you just want to, and again, over 3,500 staff, trying to kind of always keep, my job, trying to keep some perspective to this as we work through it. So, so I thought just again, where I will share it again tomorrow with or Thursday with their parents, with the trustee ward, but just I thought I'd give you a little bit of an update and more than glad to take any questions, and not just me, any of our staff, in terms of if there's something there with related to COVID before we can move on to the rest of the meeting with other stuff. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. And we'll ask for questions in a moment, but I'd like to get a mover. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please, that the Board of Education receives the update on COVID-19 for information as presented? Moved by David Todd, seconded by Suzanne Perot. Questions from the board? I understand, David Todd, you have a question, please.
Yes. First off, I want to express my appreciation because I know this is, very difficult. I was encouraged today by the fact that Dr. Bonnie Henry, our provincial health officer, she talked briefly about the fact that elementary schools, which really kind of took off a bit this September, October, have now stabilized, and the curve seems to have turned around a little bit, and they're not sure, it might have been the increased mask measures. But it's still concerning, and I know that we're an employer as well. And you talked about some of the accommodations around, say, parent teachers. not that there's going to be a huge spike, but that's coming up. And I am, full disclosure, a teacher, and I know parent-teacher interviews are a concern. And you said you've made measures, and some schools have gone. Like I think you have to be responsible, almost like a school, or even I'm not sure how far we could drill down to this, but is there accommodations for staff that have said, I don't feel comfortable fully doing in person yet, or I'm immunocompromised, or there's a medical concern where they may have to, they can't, run that risk?
Do you want me to take a stab at this one, or would you like to? Sure, I'll turn it to Superintendent Barry Bunyan on that one.
I don't know what anyways. There's a couple of examples you've used there, Trustee Todd. So if someone's immunocompromised and has a medical reason, then we always accommodate that, like in any medical reason. And so that would already have been determined and in place, because that's not something that someone would come to school every day for a month and a half and then all of a sudden say, hey, I've got this, we would have known about it and dealt with it. As far as people who have a anxiety or a nervousness around all of this, there are precautions that are being taken at the school. People are wearing masks, barriers if needed, people are physically distancing, right? So there is because it's just the teacher and a parent or two parents, and it's not a classroom full of kids and typically and stuff, it's very simple to be able to put all of the extra safeguards in place for people to have a parent-teacher conference and to feel comfortable about it. So that's being dealt with on a school-by-school basis. And there are a few people who are saying they're anxious and nervous about it. That's being worked on and dealt with the individuals. To be honest, I'm not getting a flood of calls on it. Not saying that there aren't people out there who feel nervous. I'm just saying I'm not getting inundated with calls about it.
Thank you very much. And okay, another question. Yeah, thank you, Suzanne Pro. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair, to the superintendent. Thank you so much for that very detailed presentation. Can I trust the same thought process will be applied to as we're walking into and through our IEP season for our parents with IEPs, as we're doing parent interviews, the IEPs are coming up to be renewed. Are we offering that same type of scaffolding support for educators and families for those meetings as well?
Yes, the same kind of accommodations would be put in place, right? So there'd always be that ability to wear masks, hand hygiene if necessary, barriers, distancing, all of that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I see no other questions at this time, so it's been moved and seconded that the Board of Education receives the update of COVID-19 for information as presented. All those in favor, please. And it is unanimous as well. Thank you very much. Over the page. Now we're at 6.2, Superintendent's report, the intensive support model at Douglas Park and Nicamickle Elementary Schools. Go ahead, sir.
I want to speak because I want to take all the wording that they're going to use and put them in a tough jam. So, so we're going to have Deputy Minister Val Gill and Assistant Superintendent, Deputy Minister now.
Promotion.
He's just passed me in pay grade, and Assistant Superintendent Woody Bradford speak to this. I love it because it's not COVID. I love it because it's a positive. This is an incredibly positive story, and I think many of you, we've heard about learning impact during COVID, and it's a reality out there, and certainly in some of our more challenging areas in terms of communities that really face some tough circumstances in terms of demographics. Are there other interventions, things that we could do to try to assist these kids that have likely fallen behind in literacy and numeracy, and also facing some struggles in terms of the social emotional learning? And very fortunate, we've been able to put some funding towards trying things at a couple of sites here, Douglas Park and Nicamickle. And yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled with what's happening here. And I'm really looking forward to you having the opportunity to hear about that great work. And I'll turn it over to our minister right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Stewart. You can work for me anytime. So it is absolutely true that anytime superintendent is providing an introduction, I try and come up with 3 or 4 different introductions because normally he takes a bunch of mine. So, and he never fails and did it again today. But certainly wanted to, again, something we are very proud of. The work that we're doing in the district around enrolling our schools is important work. Trustees, you've heard all of us come up and do presentations about different things, different, whether it be transitions, literacy, numeracy, but all of those big rocks are really a part of a greater plan, and that plan is really encircled around that work of enrolling our schools. And credit needs to be given to our instructional services team, our learning support team who've been working together, and certainly to the whole team in our schools, our teachers and our principals and SEAs as well. So now this is a bit of a complicated drawing, but I did want to draw your attention to this because I think, again, it is an intentional plan. The work that we're doing in our schools as an overarching plan is embodied within this framework of continuous improvement that our principals have seen and probably seen ad nauseum already this year, because it's really important for trustees to be aware that the work is guided by the work that you put in front of us around the strategic plan. And over the last little while, there's been a tremendous amount of work done by Don Tomlinson and by Mike Pugh and by others on the strategic plan around creating our framework for enhancing student learning and really focusing on the intellectual, human and social and career development of our students. And you're going to hear report backs about our vessel, as we call it so affectionately, over the years, and we'll be checking in to see, not only for you but ourselves, to see how we're doing as a district moving forward around the learning of our students. Past that, we're making connections with each individual action plan in our schools, and certainly supported by growth plans we've heard, and hopefully we'll continue to get to that place. The bigger piece for us, again, to create those compassionate learning communities and inclusive instructional practice and allowing access to grade level curriculum for all of our students through enrolling our schools, that's our district goal. And we're doing that through 3 different blocks. But really built on that bottom block of social and emotional learning. Because let's be honest, if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel cared for, and if you don't feel like you belong, as a student, even as a staff member, you're not going to learn. So for us, our focus over the last few years is really being able to establish that bedrock for all of us around what's important for kids around how they feel safe in the school. And so again, that's been a focus, and we've been working with Jennifer Cates over the last 2 to 3 years with the evening series, and we're continuing that work this year with a gentleman by the name of Kevin Lamoureux, who is really weaving in that sense of belonging around the anti-racism piece and truth and reconciliation. And we've had our first evening, and talk about powerful. That presentation was amazing. Once we have that in place, and obviously all this work is happening simultaneously, we're working on the instructional practice, providing the skills necessary for our teachers, our SEAs, or administrators to do the work in the schools in the best way possible. And then through the systems and structures, we call it RTI, we call it MTSS, multi-tiered support system, call it what you will. What it really means is we have to have systems in place so we don't miss any students. We have to be proactive through instruction, and we have to be reactive when the instruction doesn't work for some of our students. So the district actions, what are we doing? We want to create opportunities around trauma-informed practice. We're doing a train the trainer model. Again, we've heard a lot from trustees, certainly a passion area for many of you, around ensuring that we're taking care of our students through the training of our staff around trauma-informed practice. Establishing a vision and an action plan focusing on anti-racism with the help of Kevin Lamoureux. You've heard about him already. Again, it's been a focus of the district through last year, but we really got the sense at the end of last year that we needed something different, somebody to guide us through this very difficult and complicated topic. Obviously important to all of us, always important around the sense of belonging, and Kevin is doing an amazing job already, and already hearing comments about being one of the most powerful speakers that we've had as a district. So looking forward to more dinner series with him. In addition, Kevin will be here as a keynote in February as well. Implementing trauma-informed practice in schools with Chuck Geddes as well, and provide professional learning to support districts installing our schools initiative around the district. And further, really digging down with our children in care, youth and children in care. We have spent the last 2 years, you've heard from Aya Hare, who's presented here around the work around children in care. Actually, our first step was really figuring out who those children were. Again, it should be easy. It should be something where, hey, that's just click on a button and there they are. Actually, it's not that easy. We really had to go through and identify those students, making sure we knew exactly who they were, who their supports were, how we were creating supports in schools, and how are we connecting the supports between the school and beyond, certainly with further action. I'm going to pass it on now to Assistant Superintendent Bradford, who's going to talk about action plans and the examples in both our schools.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Gill. So I get to continue the journey and share it with you in terms of how do we really capture story in our district and how do we make sure that we're sharing that story effectively. And as Deputy Superintendent Gill stated, our FESL is our system story. It's what captures what we do across the whole system. What feeds our FESL are our action plans. And within our action plans, there's chapters of success that we share out to our communities about the things that we're doing with our students through the lens of installing our schools. So within these school action plans, there are action plans that are, again, feeding our FESL, and there are specific actions that are happening, focusing on that social emotional learning. And really it starts with a commitment. It's our commitment to the social emotional learning pathways that we're going on, our commitment to truth and reconciliation, our commitment to anti-racism and inclusion. Those are powerful commitments to make, and it's something we stand by in our district to ensure that we follow through with those commitments. It then begins with ensuring that we have the skills to be able to do that work. And as Deputy Superintendent Gill talked about, Jennifer Cates has been on that journey with us. Now Kevin Lamrou is helping us with that journey, making sure that we're implementing the strategies to develop compassionate learning communities with inclusive instructional practices in all our schools through the lens of Aboriginal worldviews and perspectives. A powerful statement that really elevates the work that we do collectively together in our schools. We need to make sure that we have the resources in place to do that. So we implement social emotional learning school-wide through resources that have been created through our instructional services department, our learning support services in collaboration. And then it's important that we engage our community in these discussions. And we do this collectively together as a group. And it always starts in the classroom and builds its way up through our school into our system. Creating the structures are really, really important within our school to ensure that our kids have a sense of belonging and they know that they have adults in the building that care about them. Our commitment to have each one of our students have a minimum of 2 adults in each one of their schools caring about them, and make sure that we're tracking that information through the different district assessments and school-wide assessments that we have that feed the information that we have within our schools. And then how do we take all this good work we're doing around social emotional learning, providing opportunities for hope for all of our children, and infuse academic rigor into it, ensuring there are clear academic goals in literacy and numeracy that all students can be successful. We have to believe that social emotional learning, literacy, and numeracy work collectively together to ensure all our students will be successful with the right supports. When we think about our school action plans, there are curious questions that drive the work that we do. And we work with our school communities to ensure that we are embedding the processes of a professional learning community. What does that mean? It means collectively we believe that all students can be successful. It has to start there. Before you put any structures in place, before you do anything else, it's a vision you have as a group, and then you unpack that thinking together through curious questions that really ensure that the classroom teacher has the pathways to be successful for students, and that classroom teacher has the wraparound support to ensure that if students are not meeting those requirements in terms of their academic or social emotional learning needs, that we have the systems and structures to support them. So it starts with the tier 1 instruction and the questions about what we want our students to learn. What are the core standards that our students need to be able to learn in social emotional learning and literacy and numeracy? How will we know we have learned it? What are the common assessments we use throughout our buildings and our classrooms to ensure that we know that they are having success in those core outcomes? And then this is where the classroom teacher we know, and I'm going to share some complexity around Douglas Park and Nikomak. We know that the work of our teachers and our support staff and our principals and vice principals, it is challenging work, and it's such critical work. And so a classroom teacher has to have the supports to ensure that if students aren't going to be successful, then we need to respond, not as a single person, but as a collective system within that school. And that's where your tier 2 and tier 3 supports come in. So those 2 questions at the end really involve the whole community wrapping around that classroom so that our students are successful. And with the specific focus with our Indigenous students, our children, youth in care, and students with diverse abilities. We want to make sure that those group of students are getting every opportunity to be successful. So within our action plans, we have different elements that we use to unpack the work that we're doing, and this is all focused around excellence. We've shared with you before the 8 elements of change that we go through our action plan through learning, with a focus this year specifically on the lens of enrolling our schools through 3 structures: the professional learning, the measurement, and student learning. Excellence in collaboration, what does that mean? It means that we all believe in our school that our children could be successful. And to be able to do that, we need to be able to build in time during the instructional day, during that instructional week, so our teachers can meet, have conversations that are directly related to the success of students. We then need to be able to make sure that the assessment tools that we're using are the highest standard and they're triangulated. We take a look at what's in the classroom, we take a look at what's happening across the district, and we take a look at what's happening across the province. So that triangulation of information informs the decisions that we're making about student success down to the individual story. And we look at that evidence to ensure that we're making really good informed decisions about the instructional practices we're using for our students. And then finally, just the student learning piece, making sure that we've identified those essential outcomes and we've aligned our schedules within our building to know that when we're providing tier 1 instruction in the area of somewhere like literacy, then when do we provide tier 2 and tier 3 instruction? Where does that happen during a day? And that is a complicated, you think of an elementary school, a middle school, a secondary school, to align schedules like that, you have to work collaboratively together to do that. And it's a complicated process, and we're on a journey this year of working collectively together to do that work. So I'm going to share a story with you, just like our Minister of Education, Whiteside, was here yesterday with Seamless K and did a fabulous job. And in her mind and her heart, she carries that message that every child matters. And that's the work that we look through in terms of working through truth and reconciliation. We need to truly believe that every child matters, and we're willing to do whatever it takes for that child to be successful. So standing yesterday at Nikomakil, the opening of Seamless K at Nikomakil, and sharing that story, our board chair, Rod Ross, was there with us, sharing that celebration. It seemed like a perfect time for us to have this presentation today, as she shared how important Seamless K is and the work we do with our kids. And that's the work we're doing every single day in Nikomakil and Douglas Park, along with all our other schools across our district, because we truly believe every child matters, and we're willing to do an intensive support model when they don't respond the way we need them to respond in a supportive manner. So this is a story. This is a story about 2 schools that have a huge amount of heart, a huge amount of knowledge and skills within the buildings. And each day that our kids walk through those doors and we're supporting the work that they're doing, we want to ensure that that staff has the skills necessary to be successful to support each and every one of our students. And this is where we began the year with Nikomakil and Douglas Park. And this is a story I want to share with you, that as we began the year with Nikomakil and Douglas Park, we have tried things in the past in terms of making an effort to provide intensive support, adding extra admin time, adding instructional coaches into the building to support the skills of staff working alongside. And we realized we need to elevate that a little bit more. So with the financial support, we got the opportunity to do some things a little bit differently this year. And we looked at this managing complex change model, and we focused on this as a key to our success in both of these buildings. And is it perfect? We don't know. We're going through that journey right now, but we're willing to commit to this journey to ensure the staff have the skills they need to do. So as we get feedback in terms of how our students are doing, then we need to make sure we provide the skills for our staff to be successful. And it all starts with the rationale and vision to believe that all our students can be successful. What are those skills our staff need to have to be able to deal with complex needs of students? What are the resources they need to have? And how does all that focus on an action plan that's going to be successful through change? At the beginning of this year, an example of that at Nikomakla and Douglas Park, right at the first week, we provided 3 days of intensive training for the staff. The complex training model was built on 1 day, so all the staffs could understand the why around complexity. Is that journey finished? No, it's a journey every day you learn. And they continue to learn that, but they're digging into that work. The other 2 days were taken as an opportunity for our instructional services team to work alongside that staff, to give them the skills to set their classrooms up with the right structures at the beginning of the year, knowing that there was going to be complex needs in those classrooms. With that, there was a comprehensive idea around a plan of action of continuing that in-service throughout the year. So the teachers and support staff, the administrators in the building, all the people that are working together have the plan of action that's going to create the change that's going to be successful for those students. The focus is on the 3 pillars of literacy, numeracy, and social emotional learning. And that's where the intensive support has come from, starting with literacy and social emotional learning. When I give you some examples, these are some examples of the work that's going on in terms of specific actions, ensuring that explicit reading instruction is a priority in both of those schools, increasing students' engagement in literacy through joy, providing in-service for the implementation of a balanced literacy framework, which we've created, which again, it's a document that provincial-wide is being used. It's an outstanding document that our instructional services department has created. Provide in-service around effective instructional practices in literacy, specifically reading, build the common assessments together, make literacy visible in the schools and classroom, protect and maximize the instructional time, focus on those essential learning standards, read as much as possible, make that a priority. Not just the classroom teacher, but the whole support staff working alongside. We have reading buddies happening in the classroom. Again, a collaborative effort. And then resourcing the building we need to through technology and other programs that we have that we know that are having high levels of success in our schools. In order for this to happen, we know that the steps of professional development for our staff have to be key. Here are 4 examples in terms of the work that we're doing through this in-service. So making sure that staff experience effective professional development. What does that look like? It happens in the moment, in the time. So co-planning, co-teaching, working during the bell time of 8:30 to 3 o'clock to implement the skills for those teachers to be successful, those support staff to be successful with their students. And I just want a huge shout out to the Douglas Park staff and Nikomakla staff. They're digging into this work and they're doing it collaboratively together to ensure that those skills that they have meet the needs of the students in their building. Professional development that increases staff's knowledge and skills and or changes their attitudes or beliefs. So really, again, with that trauma-informed practice, what do we learn from that? And how does that change our own values and beliefs? And how do we go through that process to be successful at the end? Staff use their new knowledge and skills and attitudes and beliefs to improve the content of their instruction or their approach to pedagogy or both. So again, real-time instruction that's going to meet the needs of our students. And then finally, an instructional changes that fosters the increase of student success and learning. Literacy, social emotional learning, and numeracy. So this is what the cycle looks like. So after we did the intensive training at the beginning of the year, we then broke out into a 6-week cycle. The 6-week cycle had intensive supports. At Douglas Park, it happens on Tuesdays. At Nikomakla, it happens on Thursdays. They have K1, so they're built-in bands. K1 teachers meet together, 2-3 teachers meet together, and 4-5 teachers meet together under the guidance of our instructional services team working alongside them. We provide TTOC coverage into the building so that those teachers can be released to have that conversation. Our principals and vice principals are part of those professional learning communities, along with district staff supporting the work that's going on. They engage directly in improving reading instruction to support student literacy. They design and try out different learning strategies. Last week at our superintendent's meeting, Principal John Hankey shared a story about he's got a science background, so he shared it's a scientific study at times. You have to look at what the needs are, try those different strategies, and then come back together and discuss what worked, what didn't work. How can I change that? how can I effectively meet the needs of those students? Observe those students in terms of what's going on, what's working for them, what's elevating their story, and what's really showcasing the strengths that they have. Staff reflect on this practice, they set new goals, and the cycle repeats. And we continue this over a 6-week period, so there's intensive training, and we do this 3 times a year, and we're starting out with literacy and social emotional learning. So an example of scenarios, the 2 goals: foster and care for a culture of learning through supporting staff and student social emotional learning. The responsibility of that is the district leadership team, learning support services team, district staff of instructional services and school staff working together. And that's an ongoing work. That's every single day in the building in terms of that training that we're doing. And then focusing on improving reading instruction to support student literacy. The responsibility, district leadership team, instructional services, district staff, school staff, and that's the 6-week cycle of that professional learning community that's happening from September to November. So finally, I just want to close with this. And Deputy Superintendent Gill talked about a safe and caring and connected community, what that means, and so important to each of our students. At the beginning of the year at Nikomakol, this was a school-wide social emotional learning literacy cross-curricular project that went across the whole school. And it really, the quote that Chief Marilyn Gabriel from Kwantlen First Nations shared, and we've shared it many times, I just think it's such a rich quote, and it just speaks to who she is. Just an incredible person. And the role of our elders is to look for the gift in our children and then work to develop and nurture these gifts so they can become artists, nurses, singers, and teachers. The Dot is a book written by Peter Reynolds, and in that book it talks about the gift of a child as an artist. And the child doesn't know that they have that gift and are reluctant to take that next step. The teacher sees this and recognizes this and encourages that child to take a risk. Just as we're encouraging the staff at Nikomakol and Douglas Park to take the risk to support their kids in what they're doing. And they're elevating their skills to be able to support those students in what's going on. The story continues with the child realizing that they have a gift because it's been elevated and celebrated by the teacher. And that child goes on to recognize that they create multiple different artistic impressions of the dot. And then that child goes on to share their story with another child who doesn't feel like they have a gift. And it continues throughout that community to nurture and care for the gifts of students through that connection and care and that sense of belonging. And right now at Nikomakol and Douglas Park, that is what we're seeing. We're seeing gifts being elevated because our staffs have the right skills to do the work and they're being supported in those skills. They have the resources to do that work, and our commitment as a district is to continue this intensive support this entire year to see the impact of the changes that are going to happen through the training and through the skills that our teachers have within those buildings. It's a successful story, and this is an example. So the school-wide read aloud and then the integration of literacy. Each bulletin board was decorated with different artistic impressions of the dot. Again, recognizing the gifts that each one of our students at Nikomakol and Douglas Park have and how we're going to ensure we support them not only in social emotional learning, but also literacy and numeracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent. You need to get this on the table. I need a mover for the presentation and a seconder, please. Can I have moved by Suzanne Perot, seconded by Charlie Fox, that the Board of Education receives a report of intensive support model. So we'll just open it up for questions first. Does anyone have any questions? I think we have a couple. If I got a speakers list of David Todd, then Suzanne Perot. Go ahead, David Todd, you're first.
Once again, thank you so much to the staff and efforts here. They're gargantuan, the efforts behind this. And I'm going to quote, it's a First Nations proverb that talks about nothing changes except from the inside out. And I think that's certainly applies here. When you got talking, I started to think about school culture, and Dr. Michael Fullen talks about school culture, and this is the challenge. He can walk into a school and tell really quickly what the school culture is like, but he takes it back to the leadership and what the leaders are doing in the building, and that kind of boils down to, And so sometimes intervention can be something simple like the principal is out there and he's or she or whoever it is, they're out there, they're involved with the reading groups and they're doing just that interaction level. And that changes just the whole mystery around reading. And it's good to see that you're doing that. I loved your managing complex change because I know that myself, I've ended out at those boxes on the end where there's confusion, there's all those things, and that happens often in educational change. Some of the things you've looked at, have you played with class size or in any way other than perhaps with the reading groups? And then my second follow-up is when all this is done, because again, we need to go back to data and it's all about results and assessment. I'm assuming that we're using PM benchmark. So as of next year, you'll give us like if we saw a growth of like 5 to 6 or you know what level if they made it from grade 1 to grade 3 or the follow-up, because that's what it's all about. It's about results in this intervention. Thank you.
Class size, both Nikomakla and Douglas Park are growing communities, but we recognize that, again, trying to ensure that we lower that class size to provide the right support when we sit down and look at schools across the district. That's one of the strategies that we use in places that we know that have a high level of complexity. So we respond to those needs at the systems level, and again, through the financial support, we're allowed to put those extra divisions in to provide the support to lower those divisions down. And to your point, yeah, there's the second question around the common assessment piece. F&P would be the mechanism we use for reading, but then common assessments with writing across each of the grade levels are numeracy assessments and looking at what we're doing in the classroom. How does that relate to school-wide data and how does that relate to district-wide data? Those are things that we have to continue to look at because to your point, it has to be evidence informed. So I know both schools at the beginning, that's where they started from. So, and we have to look at ensuring that our students in that tier 1 area, that those essential standards in tier 1, they're grasping those essential standards, and then in tier 2 and tier 3, they're getting the extra support to get the standards that they have fallen behind, and so they have continuous growth.
And just to add to it, just to your last question around will we be back to let you know where we are? The answer to that is yes, of course. That the accountability piece is something we need to look at because we have to know if the actions that we have in place are actually working. So we'll be tracking that through the data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And also, Suzanne Farrell, you had a question, please.
Thank you. Through the chair to the assistant superintendents. Such a fabulous presentation, a lot of incredible work going on in our district, and I thank you for diving so deep into these conversations. They are critical for the success of all of our students to achieve that overall inclusive environment. So I thank you for looking at it and balancing it the way you are. I have a couple thoughts of curiosity, if you will, and a question of wonder. I'm interested in understanding when we are talking about presuming competency, it's a real buzzword right now, and it leaves me as a parent of children with disabilities, as an advocate, as a trustee, as a person in community, what that means to us as it interfaces with children with disabilities coming into the classroom when we need to have repeating rollover goals. We're hearing lots of language about goals shouldn't be repeating. And so from a developmental standpoint, when we're looking at our children with learning disabilities, well, competency is different for each of them. And so presuming competency for a child in grade 4, for example, that they are all reading is a dangerous place. My youngest one, who's already graduated but didn't start reading until grade 4, had we not had the ongoing goal, changing strategies only, he wouldn't have got there. I moved to a trauma-informed practice as a parent, and I withdrew him completely, temporarily, 6 months, unschooled him, which he went from midway grade 4 to merging just above grade 5, merging grade 1 at midway grade 4 to just above grade 5. So I want to, not only for my sake, but also for people who are listening to us, to help them understand what does that mean to us as a district when we're talking about presuming competency. And the other thought I have around trauma-informed practices in our district, where are places of wonder when it comes to trauma-informed practices as it interfaces directly into the classroom, points of impact, perhaps some patterns we're seeing that are calling us to a place of pivot? And what are those pieces that we need to further increase the support our staff, for example, perhaps having high five moments where a staff member is feeling overloaded themselves and they need to check out. Are we instituting some of those pieces? What are those places of wonder that we're starting to explore as we're moving in further to trauma-informed practices, and how does it affect the classroom pedagogy?
So I can respond to the competency based, and I think Trustee Perot, exactly, I think the mechanism we use through IEPs, and now as we transition to competency-based IEPs, really from a strength-based perspective. So when we unpack competencies for each of our individual students, having goals that meet the child where they're at and supporting that child along the way through that lens of competency, so that, to your point, if a child is in grade 3, they have a literacy goal that's going to meet their needs in terms of that competency to be successful. And as you know, that takes a tremendous amount of work of working with our parents, working with our resource teams, working with our classroom teachers to support that skill set as they go along without judgment and with the right supports at the right time for that child to be successful. So there's a lot of information by the end of grade 3. Everyone should, you know, this what I'm going to say, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that that is where every child is going to be at the end of grade 3. So empathy, patience, and time with the right supports, and listening to our parents, working alongside them, and coming from a strength-based approach rather than a deficit approach, and having those literacy goals, having those numeracy goals, those social emotional learning goals within those IEPs that are meeting this child where they're at, and we're supporting at the right time for them to be successful. I don't know if that's exactly what you're looking for in terms of that reflection, but that's the journey that we're on. And it certainly is a great year to be doing this at Douglas Park and Nikomaco, because we're changing that structure to more of a competency base than it's been in the past. So again, we'll know more about that by the end of the year in terms of where we are in that process. But it's something that I'm looking forward to, because I think for the longest time we need to make sure that lens is strength-based. And I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, again, I think at the end of it, I think making the goals in our IEPs achievable is something that's really important. I think what often happens is that we do have the same goals in the IEP. We do that over a period of, rather than a short period like a month or less than that, where we meet success for the student. Oftentimes we push that to 6 months to a whole school year, and I think that lends to a lack of success for the student and a lack of an opportunity for them to feel like they're engaged in their own learning in a positive way. I think I just had a conversation today with the Learning Support Department around that very thing, that we need to build confidence in the learning for those students.
To your second question, around the trauma-informed practice in terms of what we're noticing with behaviors in the classroom, whether it be students, whether it's staff, how are we responding to that? I think through the training that we went through Chuck Getty's work at the beginning of the year, starting to understand what we can do to support. I'm not on the ground every day, so probably Charlene Redikoff and Diana Wilk would be able to give you some examples of strategies that are happening. I know Monday mornings are very busy places in terms of kids coming back into the system or after holidays. So there are soft starts and things like that that are put in place. We have, the self-reg opportunities for kids within the classroom for them to access that. But also, to your point, it's not only our students that are in that place. Our students come with a whole bunch of needs within their stories, and how does that impact our staff? So the awareness of that and paying attention to that, I can certainly ask Charlene and Diana in terms of the notices they have and some of the tools that we're using now that are supporting our students and our staff through a trauma-informed lens. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments? I have one comment, actually, more of a question, I guess, but I really love the comment in the presentation, joy in literacy. I don't see a lot of people have joy in literacy. So I really applaud that. And if you could just give me a little bit of context, how do you do that?
Well, it was nice to see the Minister of Education yesterday just reading a story, and there was joy there. There was joy with the pressures of the province on your shoulders. You know, we heard the questions that were asked during that press conference, the opportunity to sit down with a group of students and read a story, make those personal connections. And if I can go back to sitting in front of a group of kids and reading a story, the joy comes through connection. The joy comes through sharing those images that come up in your mind as you read a story. The curiosity comes through the questions that percolate through a story, and just the opportunity to transform your thinking through story and learn things and infer those next steps as you do a read aloud with a group of kids, and then hopefully through that process, again, I think understanding the kids, each of our students' stories, and where they intersect with literacy, where is their point of connection? Is it through a fiction text? Is it through nonfiction text? What is something that interests them in terms of their level of support? And as we know, these days, it's not just in a book that opens, right? It's on a screen, it's on a phone. There are lots of ways that we can infuse literacy into the classroom. So being aware of that and meeting students where they are, and to your point, going to a learning commons and opening the door and having kids come in with a smile on their face because they can't wait to do their weekly book choice. Those are the moments we need to continue to embrace. And it's not always about producing something at the end of reading a story. It's about the opportunity to have that rich discussion you have with your class. And I know that's happening daily at Nikomakla and Douglas Park. I should mention too, before both Deputy Superintendent Gill and myself finish, that this presentation that we put on tonight is really the work of so many individuals. And I know in your board report, we wrote about the individuals that are doing this work on the ground. The Douglas Park staff, the Nikomakla staff, our instructional services team, our learning support services team, ELL, Aboriginal support teams, the whole group working collaboratively together. It's a really, it's a special place to be, and that doesn't just happen. That happens with a true commitment. So my thanks goes, both our thanks goes to every single one of the individuals that are working in those schools and the support that we're putting in. And I'm looking forward to seeing the joy and happiness that those staff go through as we continue to support those schools.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions. Oh, Charlie, I'm sorry. Charlie Fox, did you have a comment or question?
Well, both actually. I just wanted to say that this is a great presentation, aptly named Enrolling Our Schools. I think that again, the focus on student learning, student outcomes, and student success is embedded in our strategic plan. That's great. Could you unpack the terms Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 instruction?
Go ahead.
So Tier 1 instruction is universal instruction for all students. So, so what's happening in the classroom? And the key is that all students have access to Tier 1 instruction. Tier 2 instruction really is from where all students, not when you do the first level of instruction, most students are getting it, and then some won't. So you're doing some reteaching for a group, so that would be your Tier 2. Your Tier 3 instruction would be targeted instruction for those individual students that are still struggling. The key again being that you're in each of those tiers, that students aren't missing out in instruction at any level. So those Tier 3 students are getting Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 instruction.
So the point being that the safety net there is comprehensive so that all students' learning is captured and that they can move ahead at their own level with learners that they've got the skill set.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Thank you. I need a show of hands on this, that the Board of Education receives the report of the intensive support model at Douglas Park and Nikomakla Elementary Schools for information as presented. All those in favor? Good, thank you. It's moved, carried unanimously. Thank you. On to 7.1, the Secretary Treasurer's reports. Go ahead, Secretary Treasurer, please.
Thank you, Chair Ross. At the last meeting, we gave trustees and the public an update of the enrollment that we were seeing in the first week or so of school, and I promised a more accurate report back at this meeting. We have now done our 1701 accounts for the district, which is in your package, and I have just 2 slides to highlight some of the highlighted things, and then I'll open myself up for questions. One caveat that I did want to put in the report is that we are still in the duplicate resolution process, and that's with other districts, and that happens throughout the rest of this month. So these numbers are not final, and if anything, will be potentially a little bit lower than what is shown here. But overall, this is a good news story for this district. We have seen probably record growth this year. The first section I wanted to talk about was the impact on the funding. So the numbers that are in your report compare projection versus what actually resulted. The actual enrollments versus last year are further on in the report, and I'll address some of that in the next slide. The district was up 753.875 FTE over the budget that we did in the spring, which is a very large jump over that, for just over 5.9 million more in additional funding that'll be coming to the district to support those students. This was offset by a decrease of 55.375 in the alternate continue ed, distributed, and homeschooling. The bulk of that being in the homeschooling, which is why the funding went down very little, because we are not funded very much for homeschool students. We went down 63 students to 77, which is still really high. Typically, we are in the 10 to 15 range in the homeschooling, and we only get $250 a kid, so that's why the funding hasn't dropped anywhere near, the 55 number that is shown there. Our level 1 and level 2 and level 3 students all changed a little bit. Level 1 was up by 5, level 2 up by 57, and level 3 was actually a little lower by about 4 students, which means an additional funding increase in that category of just under $1.4 million. We also saw in our English language learners a big jump. We have historically, the last number of years, been around the 1,400 student range, give or take. That jumped up to over 1,600. So I think that reflects a change in the demographics in our community that is happening, and that I think caught even ELL department quite off guard. So that's something that we're going to keep a look at over the next little while and see if that's a trend that's going to continue. On the unique student needs, Aboriginal and adult, minor changes there. They all netted out to be just around $7,200. And then summer session increased just over $142,000. Still down from what we have in a normal year. We budgeted, I think it was about 70%, and even pretty close to those numbers. On the enrollment side, you can see compared to last year, our school-age students headcount is up 917 students, which is a huge jump, in about 936 FTE. School-age online and DL, you can see the headcount is down drastically, but that's because, if you recall, last summer session the year before was done as a DL model, and just because of where COVID was at that point in time. So that's why that reflects in a large headcount change there and a FTE change. The actual DL program didn't take that big of a drop, obviously. Graduated adults is down 68 students for 8.62, and some of that is timing on funding. You have to get through certain percentages of courses, so some of that may be picked up as the year goes on in subsequent counts. So that's the update on the enrollment, and with that, if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
And thank you. I just need to get this on the table first, so I need a mover for the enrollment report. So David Todd, and a seconder, Suzanne Pearl. Thank you very much. Suzanne, David Todd, you're first. Thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, the Secretary Treasurer, on top of what you would consider, and I'm not sure, when you say historic enrollment increase, would you say this is, certainly in your time with us, this is the largest enrollment ever in the school district of Langley, correct?
Since I've been with the district, this is absolutely the largest enrollment increase.
And certainly recent history. So given the fact that it's historic enrollment increase, hopefully there's a corresponding historic response when it comes to school builds. Is that in the works?
In September, the board submitted their capital request, and unfortunately, we have to wait now for the capital response letter to see what that is. The board did pass a motion at the last meeting to write a letter to the ministry and our MLAs. That has been done and sent off. So we will have to see.
I see no other questions, so I'll just jump in for a second. Level 2 is increased in special ed to 57. Seems to be quite striking. What is level 2?
I might have to get some help from deputy superintendent. He'd probably be able to specify what level 2 students are better than I would for a special needs level 2. Trustee Todd, because as a resource teacher, thank you.
Level 1 is typically students that are either blind or deaf, and then level 2 starts going down the list of special needs students. So in that case, it might be sensory motor. Yeah, I believe autism falls in the level 2. So, and basically each one has a funding level that comes with it. So yeah, that's basically what it is.
Thank you. I guess my observation is it seems like people are attracted to Langley that have level 2 background. So that's an observation, that's all. But thank you very much for your presentation today. Oh, another question. Okay, I'm sorry. I did you have it on my list as well. Thank you. Trustee Marty Wilson, you're good.
Great, thanks. My question was actually revolving around level 2 and the increase as well. I noticed that our overall increase seems to be close to 1.4 million in special needs funding. So I'm just wondering, have we hired extra resource teachers and SCAs and different supports to support these, or are we going on mainly what we already had existing in our budget?
So there has been postings for 15 SEAs since the start of the school year. Resource teachers is based on case lists, so yes, they will be added. We're currently short right now, but we are looking and have postings out for those. And we have a request in for any further budget needs that DLT is evaluating from that department and should be approving in the next week or so based on the additional funding.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Secretary Treasurer. I'd like to all those in favor that the Board of Education receives the funding enrollment update for information as presented. All those in favor, please. And is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Number 8 is our policy committee. The chair of the policy committee is Trustee Shelley Coburn. So I'll let her take care of 8.1 policy 1 and policy 6. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So at the last policy meeting, we discussed policy 5 and 6, and it's the chair and the vice chair elections of. So as a result, a motion, 2 motions are being brought to the board. So the first one is that the Langley Board of Education serves notice of motion, the district's education community and its education partner groups, that it intends to adopt the revisions to policy number 5, role of the board chair, at the December 14th, 2020 regular meeting. So that's my motion.
Thank you very much. I need a mover. Okay, so moved by Shelley Coburn and then seconded by Charlie Fox. Thank you.
Would either of you like to speak on it? Sorry, I was wondering if any of the committee members would like a chance to speak on the motion before Okay. But you want to speak? It's up to the chair.
So, just curious for the policy committee, when these revisions would take effect?
Thank you very much. Yeah.
That's right, yes. That's optimistic. No.
All right, thank you. So no more discussion on this? Okay, I'll call the question if I could then. All those in favor, please? All right, so for notice of motion.
Missing. Okay. Great.
I can read it out for you if you like.
My scribe is like totally timed out, so those are the revisions, yeah, with the. Oh, is it? Okay, thank you. So that the Langley Board of Education serve notice of motion, the district's community and its education partner groups, that it intends to adopt the revisions to policy 6, role of the board vice chair at the December 14th, 2021 regular board meeting. Yes, correct.
Thank you very much. So moved by Shelley Coburn, seconded by, go ahead, thank you. Marty Wilson, go ahead. Do you have a comment as well? Yep, go ahead. Okay. Go ahead, Marty Wilson.
I would like to make an amendment to the motion. I don't believe we noticed when we were at the policy committee meeting that in the second sentence, so we are striking out annual at the annual meeting, but then in the next sentence it says vice chair during the next year at the pleasure of the board. So we need to strike during the next year as well so that it is fluid and doesn't confuse people. I heard there's no such thing as if you were friendly.
Okay, I just, it doesn't show up on my document in front of me, so
So just striking during the next year. And I need a seconder.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor of that? Okay, amendment, thank you very much. Okay, it carries. By Suzanne, by Shelley Coburn, and also by Trustee Ward, Tony Ward. Okay, thank you very much. And so all those in favor? And it moves carried unanimously as well. Thank you very much. On to new business. We've got a few things here. I have a motion from Trustee Shelley Coburn, and then also a second motion from Trustee Marnie Wilson. Would you like me to read them out for you, or would you like to do it? Cool. Okay. Go ahead.
Pardon? Somebody's actually asking me to speak louder. So the motion that's going to come forward to the board this evening is in response to what came out of our September 2021 public meeting, where it became clear to me that the board is struggling with how to walk in reconciliation. So upon reflection, the question for me is how do we engage? Because it's very important and symbolic that Indigenous communities be consulted when we are grappling with how we move forward. But at the same time, as elected officials, this is our work to grapple with. So I always struggle with how much we rely on outside help to make this decision.
Shelley, just a point of order here. Do you mind if we just put it on the table first? I thought you were going to read out.
No,
the
I was
motion.
just doing the rationale
Okay,
for the motion.
Yeah, let's get the motion.
You
on
want
the
your
floor
motion
Yeah,
first?
if you just get the
Okay.
motion on the floor. So if you could
So,
just read out the motion.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
that
Thank
the Langley Board of Education ask our Yasdale representative and staff to go to the Yasdale table to get the information to guide trustees on the next steps regarding status of our flags.
Okay, could you say it one more time? We don't have it.
That the
because it's
Board of
different from the one on my paper.
Education ask our Yasdale representative and staff to take the half-masting of flags to the Yasdale table to guide trustees on next steps. We got it? That's so much work. That the Board of Education ask our Yasdale representative and staff to take the masting of flags to the Yasdale table to guide trustees on our next steps.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Your rationale now.
Okay, can I just start where I was? Perfect. So again, I do struggle, and my colleagues would know that often I say this is our decision to make. So finding a solution for me has been troubling. It is important for us to do this right, and so many in our community are impacted, but are not linked to schools. We have grandparents, caregivers, elders, survivors, and survivors of survivors. And for many, they're not tied to any one nation, but rather they call this traditional unceded territory that the school district resides on their home. We need to honor them too. Their trauma and pain from the intergenerational impact of residential schools comes with them no matter where they are. So it is abundantly clear that the Indigenous communities be consulted when we ask, what is an appropriate way for the Board of Education to honor our shared history as Canadians all year round? What action can this board take that reflects the learning and understanding that has happened and continues to happen within our families and our staff, and also at our school sites? The TRC has made it abundantly clear that all Canadians have a responsibility in reconciliation and that it should not land squarely on the shoulders of our Indigenous people. It is also our work, mine and yours, this board. This is my learning, my responsibility, and my journey, but it's also a collective one. So I really want to get this right, and I believe that this is probably the best way for us to do that, and I'm just really hoping that between staff and our representative that the board receives more information so that we can know the best way for us to proceed, where we honor right people in the right way and also do our work as elected officials. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Coburn. And I'm just going to ask the Secretary Treasurer to read that out one more time. Was there any other discussion on this? It's pretty clear, and what have you? Let's get it on the. Could you read it one more time?
That the Langley Board of Education ask our Yasdale representative and staff to take the half-masting of flags to the Yasdale table to guide trustees on next steps.
Thank you. And so I'm assuming you're going to be the mover for that. And if I could have a seconder, I didn't have that in my fault for that. Moved by Shelley Coburn and David Todd as the seconder. Thank you very much. All those in favor of the motion as read out, and it carries unanimously as well. Thank you very much. And our item is a motion from Trustee Marnie Wilson. Would you like to read yours up? And then we'll get a mover and a seconder, and then we'll have discussion.
Great, thank you. So my motion is that the Langley Board of Education send a letter to the Minister of Education advocating for an increase in funding and resources for mental health supports for students.
Thank you very much. Moved by Marty Wilson, seconded by David Todd. Thank you. And your rationale?
Great. Yes, so mental health resources have been stretched thin for far too long in all sectors across our province, but the current lack of resources for child and youth mental health are creating a dire situation. Early intervention is crucial. Our young people are our future. We need to support them. And the school system is just not funded enough to do that in a way that students deserve. School counselors are stretched across multiple schools and often have huge caseloads of timetabling work to do. School psychologists are in such short supply that student assessments can take up to 3 years. The pandemic has emphasized the need for more support, and it is crucial that the district have the assistance of government to fund it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Question, please. Yes, go ahead, David Todd, sir.
Sorry, thank you. Also speaking strongly in support, the last provincial budget, the government put aside $500 million in new funding for mental health. And I did some research on an article funded by the Canadian Mental Health Association examining the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on family mental health in Canada, findings from a national cross-sectional study. And basically, I won't go through it all, but the results state that 44.3% of parents with children under 18 living at home reported worse mental health as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. And those with school-age children, 28.9% of the parents reported their children's mental health had worsened since the pandemic. And this is a cross-section across Canada. It certainly was exacerbated early on in the pandemic, when a lot of it was at home and the online and the inequity in access that occurred at that time, but it's continued to stand. And I honestly think there are a number of great resources out there. There's the Erase, they've got pages, as was mentioned earlier. We talk about mental health, but we need to do something about the stigma around mental health, and we need to fund it appropriately, because right now we have a COVID pandemic, but I'm worried that we'll have a mental health pandemic down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Todd. Any other comments? Go ahead, Trustee Ward.
Okay, this might seem like an odd comment, but I am definitely in favor of this motion. My only thought is, and I've said this before in other motions like this, is what is the actual utility of this? Like when we're knocking on their door and they have effectively a formula of some sort where they distribute the funding. Of course, I'm in favor of this, and I agree with Trustee Todd's comments as well. So it's only about that aspect of are we just sending letters for no reason? I think it's probably a great idea, even if it's a slim hope. But that's my question.
Thank you, Trustee Ward. Any other comments? Go ahead, Trustee Suzanne Pro.
Thank you, Trustee Wilson, for bringing this motion forward. I speak strongly in favor of it. And my hope is that our ministry will begin to start putting stronger feet on the ground, Trustee Ward, with regard to this conversation when we're downloading the pressures into our school districts for that ongoing care that has to occur through our staff. We need to and must, we have an obligation to care for that mental wellness of the child in those buildings. The pandemic has highlighted and exasperated it. We don't know what the outcome is as we start flowing out and what the cooling off might look like. And we need staff who are prepared. We need staff who are trained in trauma-informed practices, because it's a collective trauma that we're walking through. And so globally, we should have every single school trained in trauma-informed practices. What does it mean as an educator to be trauma-informed? Where are their triggers at? Where do they reside? How are they impacting the classroom? What kind of trauma is coming into the classroom? And how do we support them through that extra support through staff? And really, that's the larger conversation I think that needs to occur. But it has to start with this, and how these conversations get initiated through our school boards and petitioning forward to the ministry to say we need help and we need it now, because it's a crisis is what it is, and we need to sound the alarms. So thank you, Trustee Wilson, for that.
Thank you, trustees. I think we're all in favor of this, but last comments? Oh, I'm sorry. More people would like to speak? Okay, go ahead, Shelley, and then Charlie.
So why we do it is this squeaky wheel, right? And also to establish a precedent of asking. So if we've been asking for 4 years and another district has been asking for 2, you know, like it's really that simple. Like if you just keep asking and asking, the worst they're going to do is say no, but the best that's going to happen is you're going to establish a case for not just, because mental health was an issue prior to the pandemic. It's just one of those things now that the rest of the world is like, oh my goodness, mental health. So thank you to my colleague Marnie for bringing this forward. I'd also just like to say too, we do often talk about trauma-informed practice and like makerspace to me, right? It's very important, and it is something that is a paradigm shift in a lot of cases, because before trauma was treated like bad behavior. So what I would like to point out though is that, and we do talk about the pandemic, the mental health, the trauma-informed lens, but what we're not talking about is how intersectionality lends to extreme complications of what we talk about mental health. So we could talk about a family who now has to really, you know, juggle their schedule in the early part of 2020. They have stress, they're working from home, they're teaching their kids. Their baseline could have been here. Maybe they have the funds, maybe they have the money for a tutor. That's great. These people are impacted. There are people who are already impacted from the pandemic before the pandemic because they were experiencing all these crises prior. No job, no money. Like, so we do need to, as a board and as a district, and I'm sure, attend to the intersectionality. So yes, I'd like to see mental health money, but, and this is just food for thought, targeted, very targeted, or layers of, because there are some people who were already under. And this has just pushed them because of factors and access to resource, capital, literacy, a vehicle, language, you know, these things that we often take for granted have really been made more difficult. So that's just my add-on. So yeah, Tony, it is worth it. Thank you to my colleague, and yeah, I fully support it.
Thank you. And Charlie Fox, would you like to speak, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Ross. I concur with this motion 100%. I think it shows our commitment to be on the record that this is an issue. And I think that we just have to keep it on the record. We have to keep it at the forefront. And I think this particular motion can form the nexus of a motion that we may want to take to the BCSTA annual general meeting. We won't discuss that. I think we discussed that January, February. But I think that this board, we talk about mental health, we talk about trauma-informed practices and so on and so forth. So if we're going to walk the walk and talk the talk, then we need to make it at our level first, then go to the BCSTA, recognize that at that level, and hopefully other colleagues in other districts will come on board. And then the voice increases and the voice gets bigger, and hopefully the voice will be heard. So thank you.
Thank you. No other comments from trustees at this time? All right, I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor, please. And it's carried unanimously as well. Thank you very much. Okay. We're on to trustee comments. And so I thought I'd do something novel today. I thought I'd start with the bottom of the list, Charlie Fox first. Would you like to start off with trustee?
I just want to go back to the presentation on enrolling our schools, because there was a part in there that was briefly glossed over, not intentionally by any means, but one of the things that I think the public doesn't realize is when we see the presentation on enrolling our schools, how many of the district's staff are involved. And if you do the calculation here, there's 16 people outside the school that work in those schools on this program. So when we talk about staff at the district office, I mean, this is where their life back in the classroom. They were all there to begin with. They're back there now. They're working with staff in a passion that I think was evident in tonight's presentation. And I'd like you to, our two assistant superintendents, and I think one of you was elevated to a deputy minister tonight, but I'll keep that one quiet. We won't want that to get outside this room. But I want you to pass on the fact that the work of the staff does not go unnoticed at the board table and how it's impacting student learning and student success. So that's really, I think, valued. The second thing I want to say is thoroughly enjoyed a tour the other day of LSS. And the commitment that the board of school trustees, prior to my being on this, made to ensuring that facility became a facility that I think is second to none. I know Superintendent Stewart and Secretary Isley were very informative in telling what this board committed to above and beyond what the ministry committed to make LSS the school it is today. And I know they had a function when they pre-COVID, when they kind of were at the beginning of the demolition piece and the restructuring. And I hope that we can invite our grads from past years back to see the new building, because it really truly is sensational. And the gym, the work of Brandon Gabriel and Jean Lozon in the gym is just extraordinary, impactful, all about truth and reconciliation in just, the pictures speak volumes of words. So great. And I would be remiss with not recognizing the fact that the LSS football team actually won on Friday night. They beat Robert Bateman, which I believe is a huge coup. So congratulations to their football team. It seems to be top notch this year. So
Thank you very much, rookie trustee Charlie. Next, I'm going to have trustee Marty Wilson, number 2.
Well, at least I moved down one spot to second. I had a lot to say, but I do like to try to spare people having to stay up really late and listen to me ramble on. So all I want to say is I was grateful to be invited to the Foundry Langley launch today. That was really special from Langley Memorial Hospital Foundation and Encompass Support Services putting that on. And it was an emotional roller coaster. I'm going to tell you, it was hard to hear what our youth are going through when they try to access services for mental health. Very hard, especially there was some very powerful presentations given by parents or a parent who lost their child, and it was very moving. And so it went from that to celebrating what's going to come for these youth, and it's so exciting, and I can't wait to tour when it's actually built and finished, because right now youth supposedly, you know, they try to access, and if you don't get help on your first try, it gets harder and harder to keep retelling your story to another person in another spot and being shifted around and around. So to have all the services in one place is going to be remarkable for Langley. So I'm so excited about that, and it was great. I also just wanted to say, I know we're all really tired of COVID. Like, it is so draining emotionally to everybody. And so I just want to touch on what Superintendent Stewart said earlier about the mask mandates and people, you know, being upset that no one's policing who's wearing the mask, and the people phoning principals and saying, you know, I didn't get my call soon enough about, you know, notifications and things that are Fraser Health's priorities and jobs. And so I just want everybody to realize, like, teachers and principals and all of those staff, they this was never part of their training. This is such an extra burden and it's gone on for so long. So please, please, please just remember to be kind and be patient with people because everybody is going through something right now. So that's all I want to say. Take care and have a great night.
Thank you very much, Trustee Marnie Wilson. Over to Trustee Tony Ward.
Okay, I will keep this short. Fantastic presentations. Thank you to all staff. And it just amazes me that we have, I think, a 4.37% increase with that 917 students. So Langley is massively growing. It's phenomenal to me. And I want to touch on what Trustee Fox said about touring LSS, where I graduated from. Believe it or not, I graduated. But that mural on the wall is the whole thing is beautiful. It's an amazing facility. So credit to the previous boards to pursue that. And Langley does some phenomenal work top to bottom. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony Ward. Trustee Suzanne Pro, please.
Thank you kindly, Chair. I will keep my comments brief. However, I do want to extend notes of appreciation first for our district leadership team for all of you and all the hard work you guys have done to carry this district and to push in and bear down and find your inner up to come back up, to lift us as a district, as us as a board, and carry us with the amount of integrity and courage that you guys have done. And I just want to thank you for that because I know it's not easy and I know we're not easy. And so I want to acknowledge that and thank you for your work. I also want to take pause to acknowledge September was a very difficult month and a very difficult month for our Aboriginal staff in our district, carrying us through into Orange Shirt Day and National Truth and Reconciliation Day for our first time, and all the stuff that comes with it as we walk through all the new learnings this year that they're not really new learnings at all, but the acknowledgements of our children that have been lost. And our Aboriginal support workers, our cultural presenters, our language teachers did an incredible job lifting up our students and carrying them in conversation and teaching, and most importantly, being that safe community for them to go to and comfort them. And so I just really wanted to take a pause to acknowledge them for that, because the mental, emotional, spiritual labor that encompasses profound. And it's a small community of people doing that work. And so I just want to take pause to extend my thank yous and my appreciations and my heart for your work. As we go forward, looking at conversations like the motions Trustee Colburn has presented, the importance of sitting and listening, learning. I think we're growing a lot through grace, and I just want to encourage each of us to keep moving on that trajectory. And I thank our community at large, our stakeholders, for also supporting us as we wade our way through these waters, learning each other in the conversation. In that, I bid you good night.
Thank you, Trustee Suzanne Perot. And now I've got Trustee Shelley Coburn, please.
Sorry. 917 is a large high school or 3 elementary schools. That's my math. I went to Nekomakala and Douglas, so send your kids there and they will be able to do simple math as well. So COVID, yeah, I'm sick of COVID too. Thanks, Gord, for pointing that out. So yes, of course, thanks to our staff, our district staff, colleagues at the table. But I'd also like to say thank you to our families who've, you know, despite a lot of uncertainty and for their health and mixed messaging, and they're holding it together and they're trusting that the people in the district that they've always trusted are doing the best that they can. And overwhelmingly, what comes back to me from the community, except for a small percentage, is how happy and grateful and how wonderful we are doing. And I do like to remind everybody that Last year, we had an elementary school that didn't have one case. That's impressive, right? And yeah, there were directives that made us be very diligent, and those have been relaxed. But I would like to suggest that the Langley School District has kept up to those standards, and the reflection that we do see in our numbers. Yeah, we haven't had to do closures like other districts. So to staff and family or parents, your children are safe with the people in our district. They take excellent care of them. And I appreciate the trust. Every day a parent gets up and sends their most precious resource out the door. So I would like to recognize the tremendous amount of courage and bravery. I wouldn't want to be a parent of a small child right now. I think of my sister and my little niece. And it's not a decision I'd want to make with respects to should they be going, should they be vaccinated. I'm so grateful that I have adult children. So I have tremendous empathy and compassion for the parents who are really, really facing tough decisions. So I just thought I'd take a moment to point that out. I would also, like Trustee Wilson, yeah, I attended the Foundry announcement. I knew Foundry was coming because I am an IYS ambassador. Foundry is an integrated youth services that provides holistic services. What I would like to point out is not only do they support children, they support the family. And as a parent who has gone through this a few years ago without the supports that I needed, as a family person, those supports are crucial to the success of the child. And so I think that that is also something that the Foundry brings, is for the whole family. And of course, it's being delivered by Encompass. I happen to know they do great work. So I'm very excited for what this means for the community. For my colleagues at the table, thank you for a delightful meeting. To everybody who stayed through the meeting, congratulations. And after that, good night.
Thank you, Trustee Coburn. And go ahead, Trustee Todd.
So one of the things that kind of ran through our meeting before and during and after is the question of mental health. And somebody said mental health is not necessarily, just an absence. It's part of the whole body health. And Great Britain has declared November as Male Mental Health Month. And we know, we've heard of Movember and all those things, but men struggle with mental health. You'd think they wouldn't, but they do. And talking about mental health isn't easy for anyone, and it's more difficult for men. It really is. We second guess ourselves. We fear the stigma, social isolation, and we know that's rampant right now during the pandemic. And we're embarrassed about our ability to cope. For men experiencing mental illness crisis, many choose to try and cope silently, or even worse. In Canada, 840,000 men a year are affected by depression. A study by a UBC researcher, Dr. John Olaf, shows men suffering depression tend to think of themselves as a burden to others and the supreme disappointment. Men are way less likely to seek treatment for their depression due to these continued feelings of inadequacy. So there is hope. There is a program called Heads Up Guys, and it's an online thing. You can register and you can get involved, and it's kind of like that first step, right? That first step where you realize there is a problem. And one of the reasons I'm talking about this is because I go to a lot of Lions games and they always talk about gender-based violence. And one of the precursors for gender-based violence is, of course, depression. And just a guy that thinks that he's holding it all together until he isn't.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Todd. You certainly make it difficult for me. But I just wanted to share some of my learning in the last week. I had the pleasure of being in Vancouver at a conference with a couple of my colleagues. It was the BCSTA board chairs meeting on Thursday and Friday last weekend. And it was really, one of the things that I really appreciated was our new Minister of Education. She was there for both days. And I found her very approachable. And I really find her very empathetic. I think that she really listens, and I think she gets it. And I've seen many ministers of education over the years, and I kind of think she's probably one of the best ones. So that gives me lots of hope for the system in that respect. Most recently, I saw her on Monday at Nikomeco, and she was outstanding again. The highlight for me there, though, and the learning for me was a reminder once again of the struggles of inner city schools and what our kids are going through. And in that particular community, as you look out the front door of the school, you see a brand new building that's going to be housing a whole bunch of families. And those families are going to end up in our schools, which is good. We welcome that. But one of the things that Assistant Superintendent Woody Bradford shared with me, he says, you know, Rod, these kids don't have a place to play. I mean, they don't have after-school programs that they can go, and their parents spend lots of money on them to go through swimming lessons or whatever it is, whatever clubs it might be. He said that the school playground is their go-to place, and we need to do something about that and see if we can bring it up to a higher standard. And so I really took his words to heart, and I'm booking a meeting with the mayor. That's on my topic. And I've already told her that I want to talk about this playground. So that was kind of cool. Going back to my learnings, and I won't be lengthy here at all, but one of the stories, that Aboriginal story, one of the speakers spoke on Thursday and Friday of last week. And she told a story of whether it was her or a friend, First Nations friend, had developed a list of stores she wouldn't go in. Because when she went to those stores, she was followed around. And, you know, that struck me. It just was really quite impactful. It gave me a context for what these people have gone through. Just the constant mistrust just because of your race. And, God forgive us. I just was really impacted by that. Anyway, I've got lots of learning to do, folks, and I just want to say how appreciative I am of this board, of our superintendent, our new superintendent to come, and our secretary treasurer who leads us on the financial side. What a great district moving forward. Couldn't be happier. And I just want to say thank you. My last order of business tonight, of course, is the question period. So I'll just read this out. If you'll just bear with me. Due to the fact that the public will be using an online platform for the regular board meeting, the process for question period is as follows. The board will not be taking questions from members of the public in real time. We encourage members of the public to please submit their questions by emailing feedback@sd35.bc.ca. Questions will be accepted up to 1 hour after the adjournment of the meeting. Board members or appropriate staff will respond to the individual directly to acknowledge they've received the email within 24 hours. Therefore, a response will be provided to the individual. The purpose is to ensure that those present in the audience have an opportunity to obtain clarification concerning business conducted during that meeting. Priority will be given to the questions given to respond to one question per person before considering further questions from any individual. The following will help the public in developing questions for question period at a board meeting that is in keeping with the goal of a respectful and focused meeting. Questions. 1, need to be directed to the chair and not to staff. 2, need to be related directly to the topic on the agenda. 3, need to be succinct, focused, and not be a statement. 4, may not be asked that are related to personnel or directed at an individual trustee. 5, may not be asked that are related to contract negotiations. And lastly, 6, the questioner shall provide their name so they can be reflected in the minutes. All of the above are directions provided in the board policy number 7, board operations. The chair may answer, may defer to staff, or indicate a question may not be in keeping with the above guidelines. The board appreciates the public's interest and wants to ensure a professional meeting is conducted. with question period focused on providing guests with the clarification they seek. Trustees also welcome questions from members of the public apart from question period. Their contact information is available on the school district website. The chair called for questions from the public. I'd like to now move to adjournment. Can I have a mover? Trustee Coburn is the mover, seconded by Trustee Tony Ward. Thank you very much. All those in favor? Thank you very much. We are adjourned at 9:10. Thank you very much.